They are the migrants, workers in the sweatshops of the soil, the harvest of shame.
In 1960, CBS News broadcast Harvest of Shame, Edward R. Murrow's groundbreaking documentary, which exposed the conditions on farms in rural Florida, North Carolina, and New Jersey.
It has to do with the men, women, and children who harvest the crops in this country of ours, the best fed nation on earth.
Millions of Americans saw, for the first time, third world squalor in America.
One farmer looked at this and said, "We used to own our slaves. Now we just rent them."
Americans were so horrified, Congress passed new labor laws, but little changed. America's farms kept producing harvests of shame, as Dan Rather reported from Florida in 1995.
These are still the forgotten people. Conditions for them are still awful.
There are still about 1 million migrant farm workers in the U.S. The population of towns like Immokalee, Florida, swells every winter when migrants and their families move here looking for work.
There's a lot of mistreatment going on, a lot of intimidation from the bosses.
Gerardo Reyes, a native of Mexico, came to Immokalee to pick crops in 1999. Farms in Florida grow 90% of the tomatoes we eat in the winter.
So pickers move from farm to farm and crop to crop with the seasons. But everybody knew that the tomatoes were the worst?
Yeah, tomatoes is where most of the worst conditions are happening or were happening.
When we were first here, it was a very brutal community.
Labor activist Greg Asbed came to Immokalee in 1993.
There were wage theft, sexual harassment, violence. I mean, you would come out here on Friday in the evening for payday. You know, people would get their checks right outside the office. And it was not uncommon to see somebody get beaten up by a boss. And their crime would usually be because they felt they got underpaid.
Asbed co-founded the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, or CIW. Its mission? Force fairness and workers' rights onto Florida's fields. For 7 years, the CIW tried marches and strikes, but tomato farmers refused to talk to them.
And then you changed tactics.
Yes, because you beat your head against the wall long enough, you decide that that hurts and you want to find another way to get around the wall. And if there is a way to get around it, you do.
In 2000, the CIW began pressuring the top of the tomato chain, fast food and grocery corporations, the buyers with clout. In 2005, Taco Bell became the first big buyer to sign on to the CIW's Fair Food program. Buyers agree to pay an extra penny per pound for tomato, money that goes to workers. And buyers only do business with participating Florida farmers. More than a dozen restaurant chains and retailers have signed on, including McDonald's, Chipotle, Trader Joe's, and last year, Walmart, which sells 20% of America's tomatoes. Walmart's joining was featured in the 2014 documentary, Food Chains.
We believe that by signing up to the Fair Food program, that we can have a major impact on the sustainability and the viability of the whole supply chain.
And when Walmart, known as a tough labor negotiator, signed on, did that give you a whole new level of credibility and influence?
It helps send the message to the industry that this program is not going away, that it's only getting stronger.
Florida tomato growers got the message. 90% of Florida's tomatoes are now grown on Fair Food farms.
Would you have out here 2 crews today?
Farmer John S. Forms signed on first.
It was the right thing to do, quite frankly. I was asked when we first signed, why are you doing this now? And I said, because I didn't do it 10 years ago.
How long ago should it have happened?
You know, it should have happened 150 years ago.
The S. Forms family owns Pacific Tomato, which employs 1,500 people around Immokalee.
There was no question in my mind that bad things were happening in agriculture and on farms, not just my own, but farms across the country. Things that I did not know about and had no mechanism to find out about. This gave me the tool.
That tool is the Fair Food Standards Council, an independent group that inspects participating farmers and holds them accountable.
Entonces no ha visto mujeres embarazadas aquí, ¿verdad?
Along with a penny premium, growers must have zero tolerance for forced labor, child labor, and sexual harassment. Other standards, such as mandated shade and mandatory worker training, go beyond what is legally required.
We are enforcement obsessed.
Laura Safer Espinosa, a retired New York State Supreme Court justice, heads up the Fair Food Standards Council.
We have, over 4 seasons, virtually eliminated the worst actors who were responsible for any kind of abuses of that type.
But challenges remain. Only a few supermarket chains have signed on to the program. For instance, Publix, Florida's largest, has not. In a statement, the company says it's not their place to get involved in the labor disputes of its suppliers. We expect our suppliers to follow the laws established to protect and promote a safe and healthful workplace for their employees. The company added, "We believe all parties would be better served if appropriate wages were paid by growers to their workers and we were charged accordingly." But the CIW hopes that socially conscious consumers will look for this new logo. Some Whole Foods stores now display them, with Walmart and others soon joining.
As a consumer, whether you're a consumer who buys for his or her family, or you're a consumer who buys millions of pounds of tomatoes every year, like the supermarkets, you have a choice to make.
So far, that choice has generated almost $20 million for workers on participating farms. To a typical Florida tomato picker, it means an extra $60 to $80 a week. But nationally, more than half of all farm workers make less than $20,000 a year, and a quarter live below the federal poverty line. Matt Rogers is Whole Foods produce coordinator.
A relatively small impact on cost can have a really large impact on the people who are doing this work on the farms. One of the big conversations right now with the folks who started the Fair Food program is what's next. They've done an excellent job on tomatoes in Florida, and it's a great model, and it shows great potential. So now, what's next?
The program is expanding slowly. This summer, Fair Food auditors began visiting farms in 5 more states. And in November, they will begin visiting the fields of another big Florida export, bell peppers.
Aileen, do you ever think you'll be able to get out of this kind of work?
No.
55 years after Harvest of Shame, Gerardo Reyes sees something new growing in these fields.
It's a completely different world. When you think about agriculture and the way in which all of the abusive conditions happen in every crop, basically, when you see how this is working and why it is working, yeah, it gives us a lot of hope.